My name is Tracy. Standing in the heart of my beloved bakery once again, I'm flooded with a whirlwind of emotions. The air is filled with the sweet aroma of freshly baked bread and pastries, and the sound of customers chatting and enjoying their treats is music to my ears. It's been a long and arduous journey to get back here, but I've finally reclaimed my dream. I remember the day my father and brother Ethan showed up at my apartment like it was yesterday. Dad looked haggard, his face etched with worry and regret. "The cafe's in trouble," he confessed, slumping into the couch. "Ethan has made some serious mistakes. The bank's threatening to foreclose." I sat there, silent for a moment, as memories of the past 6 months came rushing back. It all started when my parents decided that Ethan, who'd just lost his job at a tech startup, should take over the business. They believed his MBA and so-called business sense would take the bakery to new heights, despite my protests. I grew up in a well-to-do family in the suburbs of Seattle. My father, Robert, was a successful businessman who always believed in traditional business models. My mother, Linda, was more of a homemaker, but she often sided with my father's decisions. Ethan was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Meanwhile, I was the rebellious one who dropped out of a top-tier business school to pursue my passion for baking. I had poured my heart and soul into creating Heavenly Delights Bakery and Cafe. Every detail, from the hand-painted signs to the carefully selected menu of artisanal breads and pastries, was a reflection of my hard work and dedication. I'd managed to make the business profitable from the start, paying back the startup loan in half the expected time. But when my mother came into the kitchen one day with that familiar look on her face, I knew what was coming. "Tracy," she began, wringing her hands in her apron. "Your father and I have been discussing something. Ethan lost his job, and your father thinks he should take over the bakery. He has an MBA, after all." I let out a bitter laugh. "Mom, Ethan knows nothing about running a bakery. He's never worked in the food industry, and he can't even cook a decent meal." But she insisted that he understood business, management, and numbers, things she thought I struggled with. I tried to reason with her, telling her about my success in making the business profitable and the long waiting list for custom orders. But it was like talking to a brick wall. In their eyes, I was always the impulsive daughter who followed her heart, while Ethan was the reliable one, even after his risky investments led to his job loss. My father had already spoken to Ethan, and he was excited about the opportunity. "You could focus on the baking and let Ethan handle the business side," my mother suggested, her tone patronizing. I wiped my hands on my apron, leaving flour marks. "This is my business, Mom. I built it from the ground up. Dad may have co-signed the loan, but I turned this place into what it is today." But she placed her hand on my arm and said, "Honey, we just want what's best for everyone. Ethan needs this. He has a wife and kids to support." I whispered, "And I don't matter? My dreams don't count because I'm single?" "Don't be dramatic," she replied. "Your father's already drawn up the papers. Ethan is taking over as managing director next month." I felt my world shatter. "Dad can't do that," I protested. But then I remembered the fine print on the loan documents. My father's signature had come with conditions, ones I'd foolishly agreed to, never thinking he'd use them against me. That evening, after closing, my father and Ethan arrived at the cafe. They sat me down and laid out their plan. "We'll streamline things," Ethan said, swiping through his tablet. "Cut the specialty items, focus on a wider audience. No more of this artisanal stuff." I pointed out that the artisanal items were what brought in our customers, but Ethan just rolled his eyes. "The customers will adjust. We need to think bigger, Tracy. Expanding, franchising, not this small-time stuff." My father nodded approvingly. "Ethan has some great ideas for modernization. It's time this place grew up, became a real business." I looked around at the cafe, at all the things I'd created with my own 2 hands, and knew that everything I loved was about to be erased. When I asked what would happen if I refused, My father's face hardened. Then I'll call in the loan. You won't be able to buy me out. He was right. I'd reinvested all the profits back into the business, upgrading equipment and training staff. I didn't have the cash reserves to buy him out. Ethan leaned back with a smug smirk on his face. Don't be difficult, Tracy. This is for the best. You can keep baking your little treats. Leave the real business to someone who knows how it works. I stood up slowly, pulled out my keys, and set them on the table. The keychain, a small silver spatula, a gift from my first employee on opening day, made a soft clink. Go ahead, take it. Since you're the man of the family, you must know better than me. Ethan grabbed the keys without hesitation, and my father started to say I was being sensible, but I was already walking away. I took one last look around the kitchen, running my hand over the mixer I'd saved up for, and then grabbed my bag and walked out the back door. But they didn't know that I'd been preparing for this moment. I'd been taking photos of every aspect of the cafe's operations, making copies of recipes, contracts, and customer records. And I'd been quietly drafting a new business plan since Ethan started hinting at taking over. As I drove home that night, I didn't cry. Instead, I started counting the days until Ethan proved that this was a terrible idea. And it didn't take long. Ethan wasted no time implementing his vision. He fired Cindy, my head pastry chef who'd been with me from the start, saying she was too expensive. Then he replaced our high-quality ingredients with cheaper ones and cut our signature items to make room for mass-produced pastries. I watched it all from a distance, getting updates from Mark, one of the baristas who still kept in touch. He told me that the artisan bread program was replaced with pre-made frozen loaves, and the vintage decor was torn out for generic, modern fixtures. As the quality dropped and prices climbed, our loyal customers slowly stopped coming. Ethan's put TV screens everywhere, running ads on a loop. It looks like a fast food joint now, Mark texted me one day. I saved the message, along with all the others, knowing that I'd need them soon. 3 months after Ethan took control, my mother called me. The numbers are starting to worry us, she said, her voice uncertain. Ethan claims it's just a phase, but your father's concerned. Would you be willing to come back and help smooth things over? I answered firmly, no, and hung up the phone. Instead, I focused on my next move. I got a job at a different bakery across town, working the early shift. The owner, Stella, had been in the business for over 30 years, and she quickly became my mentor. She understood the pain of losing a dream, having lost her first bakery to a business partner. People like your brother, she said one morning as we kneaded dough together, they think running a food business is just about numbers. They forget that every recipe, every customer, every tiny detail makes a difference. She was right. Ethan saw the bakery as nothing more than a money-making machine, not as the place where people came for a warm, personal experience. By the 4th month, the cafe's reputation was in shambles. A local food blog that had once praised us as the best bakery in Seattle now published a scathing review of the changes. Loyal customers began sharing their disappointment on social media. Ethan's response was to hire a PR firm and hand out discount coupons, but it was money poorly spent. At the 5-month point, suppliers started contacting me. Your brother's behind on payments, they said. Is everything all right? I made note of every call, every complaint, building my case bit by bit. Then, 6 months after Ethan took over, my father showed up at my apartment. He looked older than I remembered, with deep lines on his face. We need to talk, he said quietly. I let him in but didn't offer him anything. The last time I'd offered him something, it had ended up with Ethan. He confessed that the cafe was in serious trouble. The bank was threatening to foreclose, customers were asking for me, and the staff was on the verge of quitting. Even my mother agreed that they'd made a huge mistake. I asked about Ethan, and my father's face soured. He's already moved on. Says the market's not right, the location's wrong. Now he's thinking about starting a blockchain-based startup. I asked how bad it was, though I already had an idea. Really bad. We're 3 months behind on loan payments. Suppliers want cash up front. The health inspector issued violations last week. We're weeks away from closing permanently. I walked over to my desk and pulled out a thick folder filled with 6 months of detailed documentation, photos, customer complaints, supplier issues, and financial records. This is how it's going to go, I said, sitting down across from him. You and Mom are going to sign over the business to me. No strings attached, no co-signing, no family involvement. I'll take over the debt, negotiate with the bank, and fix what Ethan broke. And you're going to write a formal letter to every employee Ethan fired, offering them their jobs back with back pay. And you'll take out a public notice in the local paper acknowledging that pushing me out was a mistake. He stared at me, realization dawning on his face. You've been planning this, he said slowly. Since the day you let Ethan take my dream away, I replied. Did you really think I'd just give up and walk away? 2 weeks later, I stood in the cafe again. This time, it was truly mine. The papers were signed, the announcements made, and the apologies issued. Cindy was back in the kitchen, already working on our signature dishes. Mark and the rest of the team were bringing back the vintage decor they'd carefully stored. A local food blog published a follow-up article, Heavenly Delights returns to its roots. The original owner is back at the helm. Our old customers started returning, drawn by the fresh smell of baked goods and the promise of a true return to what made the bakery special. My mother visited on our first day back under my leadership. She stood nervously by the counter as I decorated a wedding cake, something Ethan had considered too unprofitable to keep. I'm sorry, she said quietly. We should have trusted you, should have seen what you were capable of. I finished piping a delicate sugar flower before responding. Yes, you should have. And Ethan? She asked. I thought about my brother, already moving on to his next scheme, leaving others to deal with the mess he'd made. Ethan did me a favor, I said finally. He showed me exactly how strong I am, how much I'm capable of, and he showed you exactly why you should have believed in me from the beginning. She nodded slowly and left. I returned to my cake, to my kitchen, to the dream I'd fought so hard to reclaim. A year later, Heavenly Delights was thriving once again. The loan was being paid off, our reputation had been restored, and I even opened a small baking school next door, teaching others the skills I'd worked so hard to master. Ethan never returned to the cafe. Last I heard, his blockchain startup had failed, and he was now trying his hand at real estate development. But I kept the photos of his corporate makeover prominently displayed in my office, a reminder that sometimes you have to lose something to truly appreciate how much you'll fight to get it back. Yesterday, a young woman came in for a job interview. She'd just graduated from culinary school and was full of passion for baking. My brother says I'm wasting my time, she confessed nervously. He says I should get a real job in business. I smiled, thinking of how far I'd come. Let me tell you a story, I said, about a baker who lost everything to her brother's business sense and how she got it all back and more.